Today, a man is suppressed and broken inside, but I will tell you how, by breaking yourself and your habits, you can become the king of your world. To make sure you don't miss more videos and valuable content, subscribe to the channel about Stoicism. Today, you'll learn how to get closer to the person you've always wanted to be. The most interesting part is at the end, so stay tuned till the end. Let's get started.
Every morning began the same way. Waking up, thinking about changing my life, and then falling back into the same routine. That was my pattern for years. I went to work, performed mundane tasks, and occasionally dreamed of something greater. But nothing changed. Why? Because I was stuck in the grip of habits that seemed harmless but were quietly dismantling my life from within. Realizing that the problem was me wasn't easy. We tend to find excuses. It's not me, it's my circumstances, or if it weren't for family, work, or the economy, I'd already be successful. But the day I stopped blaming the world around me was the day my transformation began. The problem's our habits. Create Stoicism teaches us that the world is neutral. It's neither good nor bad, only our perceptions make it so. But habits distort this neutral view, turning it into chaos. They are invisible chains keeping us in a state of stagnation. Habits are born of fear. We fear the unknown, failure, judgment, and instead of acting, we take refuge in routine. It's easier to stay home scrolling through social media than to pursue your dreams. It's easier to blame the system than to confront your own weaknesses. But here's the truth. Habits control you only as long as you remain blind to their power. The moment you see them for what they are, empty, harmful, you can begin to change your life. Why awareness is the first step to change. Epictetus said, "What troubles us are not external events, but the judgments we attach to them." My first step was accepting that where I stood in life was a direct result of my choices. Every choice, even the smallest, defines the trajectory of our lives. The decision not to make a call, the decision to complain, the decision to procrastinate. Each creates a cumulative effect, like a snowball rolling downhill. I realized that if I wanted to be strong, confident, and free, I had to break these chains. It wasn't just a revelation. It was a revolution within me. The beginning of the journey. How awareness shifts mindsets. Imagine a traveler dragging a heavy load. Each step is a struggle. He's exhausted, but he keeps going. At some point, he realizes that half of the load is unnecessary. He discards it, feeling instant relief. That was me. Awareness gave me the freedom to choose. I began to see what was holding me back. The habit of procrastinating, complaining, seeking others' approval. I understood that these habits weren't just hindering my progress, they were draining my energy. The importance of taking responsibility for your life. Taking responsibility is frightening. It means admitting that you have no excuses, but it also means gaining control. I used to think life was unfair, but Stoic philosophy teaches that fairness is an illusion. There are only facts. The world owes you nothing. If you want something, you must accept this reality and move forward. I began asking myself questions. What habits are stealing my freedom? What excuses am I using to avoid self-improvement? What can I do today to become better? The answers to these questions became my starting point. Motivation through Stoicism, finding an internal compass. Stoicism teaches us to focus on what we can control. We can't control the past, other people, or the economy, but we can control our actions, thoughts, and reactions. I started applying this principle in my daily life. For example, if I felt irritated, I asked myself, What can I do to solve the problem instead of complaining? If I caught myself procrastinating, I reminded myself, time is a resource that's slipping away. Use it wisely. Each small action became a step toward freedom. A revolution in thinking, from victim to creator. Someone who has spent their whole life complaining finds it hard to become a leader. But it's possible. It begins with an internal shift. When I stopped seeing myself as a victim, I began to see myself as a creator. Here's what changed. I stopped looking for people to blame. I stopped delaying the tasks that mattered. I started viewing mistakes as lessons, not defeats. This shift was like waking up. I realized that my life was my project, not the result of external circumstances. Procrastination is a silent thief. It doesn't break down doors or shatter windows. It sneaks in quietly, disguised as comfort. It whispers in your ear, "You'll feel better if you do this tomorrow." And in the moment, you believe it. You put the task aside, feeling a fleeting sense of relief. But tomorrow comes, and so does regret. I know this because I lived it. Procrastination wasn't just a habit for me. It was a way of life. It's easy to convince yourself that there's always more time. But time is finite. Every moment spent delaying is a moment lost forever. It took years for me to break free from the grip of procrastination. It wasn't easy, but it was transformative. Here's how I did it, and how you can too. Understanding procrastination, the root of the problem. Why do we procrastinate? It's not laziness, though that's the label society often attaches to it. At its core, procrastination is rooted in fear and discomfort. Fear of failure. We fear starting something and falling short. Fear of success. Success brings expectations, and expectations bring pressure. Lack of clarity. Without a clear vision, tasks feel overwhelming. For me, procrastination often came from a desire to avoid pain. I'd rather scroll through my phone or binge-watch TV than face the discomfort of hard work. But as the Stoics remind us, avoiding discomfort is not the path to growth. Seneca said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." The illusion of tomorrow. Procrastination thrives on the illusion that there will always be more time. But life doesn't come with guarantees. Marcus Aurelius urged us to act with urgency, saying, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." For years, I told myself, I'll start tomorrow. But tomorrow turned into next week, next month, next year. My dreams were always just out of reach, like a mirage on the horizon. Breaking free began with this realization: the perfect time doesn't exist. The only time we truly have is now. Recognizing the cost of delay, procrastination doesn't just waste time, it steals opportunity. Every time you delay, you're choosing short-term comfort over long-term growth. I started to see procrastination for what it was, a self-sabotaging pattern that drained my potential. This was my wake-up call. Here's what procrastination cost me. Lost momentum. Starting something after weeks or months of delay felt 10 times harder. Guilt and shame. Every unfinished task weighed on my conscience. Stagnation. While others moved forward, I stood still. The Stoics teach us to evaluate our actions logically. I asked myself, does delaying this task serve my greater purpose? The answer was always no. The turning point. From excuses to action. My transformation began with one question. What am I waiting for? The truth? I wasn't waiting for the right time or the perfect circumstances. I was waiting to feel ready. But readiness is a myth. If you wait to feel ready, you'll wait forever. I decided to act, whether I felt prepared or not. The first step was the hardest, but it was also the most liberating. Strategies to conquer procrastination. Breaking free from procrastination required practical tools and a mindset shift. Here's what worked for me: the 2-minute rule. If something can be done in 2 minutes or less, do it immediately. This simple rule eliminated small tasks that used to pile up and become overwhelming. Chunking big tasks. Large projects felt paralyzing. To overcome this, I broke them into smaller, manageable steps. Instead of telling myself, write a book, I focused on write 1 paragraph today. Time blocking. I started using the Pomodoro technique. 25 minutes of focused work followed by a 5-minute break. This method turned daunting tasks into achievable sessions. Eliminating distractions. I identified my triggers, social media, notifications, clutter, and removed them. My workspace became a sanctuary for focus. Visualizing the outcome. Instead of focusing on the difficulty of the task, I visualized the reward of completing it. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, foreseeing obstacles and preparing for them. Accountability. I shared my goals with a trusted friend. Knowing someone else was aware of my commitments kept me accountable. The role of discipline and willpower. Discipline, I learned, is like a muscle. It grows stronger with use. The more I pushed through discomfort, the easier it became. Epictetus reminds us, no great thing is created suddenly. Consistency is key. I stopped striving for perfection and focused on progress. Even on my worst days, I made an effort to take one small step forward. Procrastination versus purpose. When I aligned my actions with my purpose, procrastination lost its grip on me. I asked myself, what do I want my legacy to be? How do my daily choices contribute to that vision? The Stoics believed in living according to nature, which for humans means living a life of purpose and virtue. Procrastination is the opposite of that. It's a denial of our higher potential. The rewards of overcoming procrastination. The day I stopped procrastinating was the day I reclaimed my freedom. Here's what changed. Increased confidence. Completing tasks gave me a sense of accomplishment and self-worth. Momentum. Success built on success. Each small victory fueled the next. Clarity. My mind felt lighter without the weight of unfinished business. The Stoic philosopher Seneca said, while we wait for life, life passes. I stopped waiting and started living. Practical exercise. Take the first step today. To break free from procrastination, start small. Write down one task you've been avoiding. Break it into the smallest possible step. Commit to working on it for just 5 minutes. You'll be amazed at the progress you can make when you simply begin. Closing thoughts. The power of action. Procrastination is a battle we fight daily. But with awareness, discipline, and purpose, we can overcome it. Remember, the perfect moment will never arrive. Start where you are, with what you have, and take the first step. As Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. We live in a world where complaining has become second nature. It's easy, even comforting, to blame external factors for our struggles: the government, the economy, the weather, or other people. Complaining feels like release, but in reality, it's a trap. It shifts responsibility away from us, robbing us of our power to act. I was no stranger to complaints. They were my default response to life's challenges. If something went wrong, I had a ready-made excuse. It's not my fault. But over time, I realized this mindset was poisoning my life. Complaints weren't solving problems. They were feeding my sense of helplessness. The day I decided to stop complaining was the day I began reclaiming my freedom. The problem with complaints. Complaining gives the illusion of action, but it achieves nothing. It's like rocking in a chair. It gives you something to do, but you don't go anywhere. When we complain, we reinforce the idea that life happens to us rather than for us. This mindset creates a vicious cycle. Blame. We shift responsibility onto others. Inaction. By blaming external forces, we avoid taking initiative. Frustration. Problems persist, and we feel increasingly powerless. For years, I thought complaining was harmless. But the Stoics teach us otherwise. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Complaints focus on what we cannot control, leaving us stuck in a perpetual state of dissatisfaction. Why do we complain? Complaints stem from a deeper emotional need. They're often a way to seek validation. Complaining invites sympathy from others, making us feel understood. Avoid responsibility. If someone else is to blame, we don't have to face our own shortcomings. Discharge frustration. It's easier to vent than to address the root cause of a problem. But while complaining might provide temporary relief, it doesn't address the underlying issue. The turning point. Recognizing my complaints. One day, I decided to track how often I complained. I kept a notebook and wrote down every instance. By the end of the week, the results shocked me. My complaints weren't just occasional, they were constant. I complained about traffic, deadlines, weather, and people. But when I looked at the list, one thing stood out. None of these complaints led to solutions. That realization hit me hard. Complaining wasn't helping. It was holding me back. It was a habit. And like all habits, it could be broken. How I broke the habit of complaining. Breaking free from complaints required intentional effort. Here's the process I followed. Awareness. The first step was recognizing when I complained. Each time I caught myself, I paused and asked, "Is this within my control? What can I do about it?" If the answer was nothing, I let it go. If there was something I could do, I shifted focus to action. Gratitude practice. Complaints and gratitude cannot coexist. By focusing on what I was grateful for, I reprogrammed my mindset. Each morning, I wrote down 3 things I appreciated in my life. This simple practice shifted my perspective. Reframing problems. Instead of seeing obstacles as setbacks, I began viewing them as opportunities for growth. The Stoics call this amor fati, the love of fate. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything thrown into it." For example, instead of complaining about a tight deadline, I asked myself, how can I use this pressure to become more efficient? Choosing silence over negativity. Epictetus advised us to speak only when our words improve the situation. If I couldn't offer a solution, I chose silence. This simple discipline helped me break the habit of mindless venting, focusing on solutions. Each time I felt the urge to complain, I redirected my energy toward finding a solution. For example, instead of complaining about traffic, I used the time to listen to audiobooks or podcasts that enriched my mind. The Stoic perspective on complaints. The Stoics remind us that external events are beyond our control. What matters is how we respond to them. Complaints focus on externals, while solutions focus on our inner power. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor." Complaining is a form of craving for things to be different. But peace comes from accepting reality as it is and taking action within our sphere of influence. The benefits of letting go of complaints. When I stopped complaining, my life transformed. Here's what changed. More energy. Complaints drain mental and emotional energy. Letting go freed up resources for creativity and action. Improved relationships. I became a more positive, solution-oriented person, which strengthened my connections with others. Greater resilience. Without complaints as a crutch, I developed the strength to face challenges head-on. Practical exercise. The No Complaints Challenge. If you want to break free from complaining, try this. Track your complaints for 1 week. Write down every instance, no matter how small. Reflect on what triggers your complaints. Are they within your control? Commit to a no complaints week. Replace every complaint with gratitude or action. Journal your experience. Notice how your mindset and energy shift. Closing thoughts. From victim to victor. Complaining keeps us stuck in the role of the victim. But when we stop focusing on problems and start focusing on solutions, we take back control of our lives. As Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." The choice is yours. Will you remain a victim of circumstances, or will you rise above them? We are social creatures wired for connection, but in this search for belonging, many of us fall into the trap of constantly seeking approval. I was one of them. The need for validation, whether from family, friends, or even strangers, became a driving force in my life. Every decision, every action was influenced by what others thought of me. This was a dangerous path. It wasn't that I cared about the people around me. It was that I had allowed their opinions to dictate my self-worth. I no longer lived for myself. I lived for everyone else's approval. But one day I realized something profound. The more I sought validation from others, the more disconnected I became from my own truth. Why do we seek approval? Seeking approval isn't inherently bad. We all want to feel seen, heard, and accepted. The problem arises when this need becomes so central to our existence that we begin to shape our lives around it. For me, seeking validation was a way of avoiding judgment. I wanted to fit in, to be liked, to be admired. But what I failed to realize was that by constantly tailoring my actions to please others, I was sacrificing my authenticity. I was becoming a version of myself that others expected, not the person I truly was. Here are the reasons why we seek approval. Fear of rejection. We fear that if we don't conform, we'll be cast aside. Desire for belonging. We are hardwired to seek connection, and validation gives us a sense of belonging. Insecurity. A lack of self-confidence often drives the need for constant reassurance from others. But the Stoics have a different perspective. Epictetus taught that our value is not determined by others' perceptions, but by our own actions and virtues. He said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." The turning point. Realizing I didn't need approval. The turning point came when I asked myself, what am I truly seeking from others? The answer was simple. Approval to feel worthy. But this approval was fleeting like a drug. The high I received from others' praise was temporary, and I was left feeling empty. When I stopped seeking approval and started focusing on self-validation, everything shifted. I stopped asking, what will they think? And started asking, what do I think? How I broke free from the need for approval. Breaking free from the need for validation was a process, but it was one of the most liberating changes I made. Here's how I did it: reclaiming my sense of self. The first step was to reconnect with my own values, not the values imposed on me by others. I made a list of what truly mattered to me, my principles, goals, and vision. I realized that I was the authority in my life, not anyone else. Embracing vulnerability, I allowed myself to be vulnerable. Instead of trying to present a perfect version of myself, I started being honest about my flaws, failures, and insecurities. This transparency freed me from the need to be validated by others. Practicing self-compassion. The more I practiced self-love and compassion, the less I needed others to give me their approval. I treated myself with the same kindness I offered to my friends. Silencing the inner critic. I worked to silence my inner critic, the voice that constantly judged me based on how others might perceive me. I asked myself, who am I living for, myself or the expectations of others? Surrounding myself with the right people. I stopped seeking approval from everyone. Instead, I focused on building relationships with people who genuinely supported my growth, not those who expected me to conform to their standards. The Stoic perspective on validation. In Stoicism, the emphasis is on virtue, not external approval. Marcus Aurelius taught that our worth is determined by how well we live according to our values, not by others' opinions. He said, "The opinion of others is irrelevant. What matters is your own moral character." When we depend on the opinions of others, we give away our power. We allow external factors to control our self-worth. But when we focus on inner virtue and integrity, we find true freedom. The benefits of letting go of validation. The moment I stopped seeking approval, I noticed several positive changes. Authenticity. I became more comfortable in my own skin, no longer trying to be what others wanted me to be. Inner peace. Without the constant need to seek validation, I felt more at peace with myself. True confidence. Confidence doesn't come from praise. It comes from knowing you are living true to your values. Fear is a natural part of the human experience. It's an instinct that keeps us safe, but when it takes hold of our lives, it can paralyze us. For years, fear ruled my decisions. Whether it was fear of failure, fear of rejection, or fear of the unknown, it stopped me from reaching my full potential. The moment I understood that fear was not the enemy, but my response to it was, everything began to change. Why do we fear? Fear arises from the unknown. It's an evolutionary mechanism designed to protect us from danger. However, in modern life, fear is often irrational. We fear failure, we fear judgment, we fear making mistakes. But these fears rarely have any real consequence. For me, fear often masked itself as doubt. I feared that I wasn't good enough, that I would fail, or that people would criticize me. But the Stoics taught me that fear is a product of the mind, not reality. The turning point, embracing fear as fuel. One of the most liberating realizations I had was that fear is not something to be avoided, it's something to be embraced. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." When I realized that fear was often just an illusion, it became easier to face it. Instead of running from fear, I started running towards it. How I overcame fear. Overcoming fear wasn't about eliminating it. Fear will always be there. What matters is how we respond. Here's how I began to face fear head-on, reframing fear as a teacher. I started seeing fear as a signal, a sign that I was stepping out of my comfort zone and growing. Instead of avoiding fear, I leaned into it, using it as a guide to what I should do next. Taking small risks. Overcoming fear doesn't require giant leaps. I began taking small risks each day, speaking up in meetings, expressing my true opinions, trying new things. With each step, my fear lessened. Controlling my thoughts, I practiced mindfulness to control my thoughts. When fear crept in, I paused, acknowledged it, and then chose to focus on the present moment. Visualizing success. Instead of imagining failure, I started visualizing success. I asked myself, what if things go right? The Stoic perspective on fear. The Stoics believed that fear was a product of our own judgments. Marcus Aurelius said, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts." By changing how we view fear, we can diminish its power over us. Fear only has power when we let it dictate our actions. When we choose courage over fear, we reclaim our agency. The benefits of facing fear. Here's what happened when I stopped letting fear control my life. Growth. I took risks that led to personal and professional growth. Confidence. With each fear I overcame, my self-confidence grew. Freedom. I stopped being a prisoner of my own anxieties. Practical exercise. The fear challenge. To confront your own fears, try this. Identify one fear that is holding you back. Break it down into manageable steps. Take one small action that challenges this fear. Journal your experience and reflect on how fear shrinks when we take action. Closing thoughts. Embrace fear, conquer life. Fear will always be a part of life, but it no longer has to control us. When we stop avoiding fear and start using it as a tool for growth, we become unstoppable. As the Stoics taught, what stands in the way becomes the way. Fear is not the enemy. It's the gateway to our greatest potential.